Good morning, dear friends. Welcome to The VUU. I am Michael Tino, joining you this morning from Peekskill, New York, in the southern Hudson Valley, where 7 or 8 flakes of frozen things fell from the sky this morning. But I'm not ready for that because it's still October. Welcome, everyone. It is our last show in October, and the leaves are turning, and the ancestors are with us. And so I thought this morning I would begin by lighting a chalice to summon our ancestors to be with us as we chat this morning. Our chalice is lit. And Joanna and Aisha are here with us this morning. You want to say hi?
Hello, I'm here in Austin, Texas, and there's no snow. There are no leaves changing, but we are there are butterflies, the monarchs, and then something called the snout nose butterfly. It looks kind of like a smaller monarch, are just everywhere. It's pretty amazing.
So I'm Aisha Hauser, and I'm in Seattle, so the other part of the United States, and we've had buckets of rain, which is good. I now appreciate water in all of its forms, even when I have to drive in it. And this morning it's dark, it's 8 a.m., and we just have a dark and cloudy morning, getting ready for Halloween, I suppose.
Super. Is everyone ready for Halloween this week?
No, that's not a thing. We get ready for Halloween on the 30th.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh no, we are in the process of the costume arranging, and my oldest daughter is going as Zelda, and she has been hand sewing her costume because she's all creative and artsy like that, which is good because her mom certainly isn't. And my mom lives in town here, and so we went out and we're doing Halloween over at her house. And so I said, okay, can you know, we went out looking for Halloween candy, and I said, wait, like, you need to talk to your neighbors and find out, you know, do you even get any trick-or-treaters? So she did that, and it turns out that actually she lives in one of those neighborhoods where, like, people drive in and drop their kids off there. It's just kind of, it's crazy and nuts and wonderful. So we're looking forward to that, and buying tons and tons of candy.
Nice.
Yeah, no toothbrushes. I always
my mom, like, for the last couple of years before she moved here, like, she would get pretzels, and I was like, no, because I would be the one to have to clean the egg and the toilet paper off of your house. We're not doing that this year.
Okay. And no circus peanuts, please. We're giving out Skittles at my house. I figured it's my political statement.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a good idea.
And my 3-year-old is going to be a butterfly. How about your kids, Aisha?
So my daughter is at her first year of school, college, so I don't know what she's going to do. And my son, I'm not sure. I don't know what he did last year. The first year we were here, he was a zombie because he was really into The Walking Dead. So he just did lots of, it was an easy costumes. You could wear whatever clothes you have and just put blood on your face and, you know, shuffle and grunt. So he was good. I don't know what he did the second year. He kind of threw something on so he could run around and get candy. So he's 15, so this is I think he's only got a couple more years of this and we're done.
Well, I want to introduce our guests so that they can join our chit-chat conversation. This morning, we have with us the newly Reverend, congratulations, Theresa Soto, currently serving as the interim minister in Flint, Michigan. You want to say hi and tell us how things are there?
Hello, everyone. Flint is a great place, and what's great about it is the people. So a lot of people have heard a lot about what's going on with the water, and our congregation is involved and responsive to that, and then also digging into Unitarian Universalism and all its other expressions. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, it's wonderful to have you with us. Theresa and I have become friends over social media and things over the last year or two. And I've really appreciated, Theresa, your thoughtful posts and things on a number of different topics. So hopefully we'll get into some of those today. Aisha, I understand you are just home from the Laredo Fall Conference.
Yes, the liberal religious.
You have like some some big topics on your agenda, right?
We had big topics. It was death, money, sex, and race. A lot. We solved it all in 4 days, so it was good.
Most non-controversial things.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably one of the best, if not one of the top 2 Laredo Fall conferences in terms of content I've ever been to. But then I say that I think almost every year. But this one definitely just blew me away. And we had a presidential forum of the candidates, and it was the 4th time that I got to see them together, the 3 UUA presidential candidates. So it was a full weekend. One of the topics that actually I would love to ask the 3 of you that came up was the issue of catching a youth during our whole lives, the sexuality education program, sexting with another youth. Now, we don't know if that youth is in the class or out of the class. The scenario explicitly said no pictures. And so what the conversation revolved around was, what do you do, and do you tell their parents? So it was a really interesting divide, I think, there was a little bit of a generational divide. I mean, that it seemed that those a little bit on the younger end of the spectrum were fine with not telling parents. And I would say almost every parent in the room was pretty clear that you have to tell the parents. And one of the more compelling arguments for me was one DRE got up and said, the other youth are going to know this is happening and tell their parents. So now the only parents that aren't going to know are the ones of the youth actually doing this. And my point was, it's a slippery slope, because once it turns into from words to pictures and someone finds out that the DRE knew, and then you get into legal issues. It was just an interesting conversation. I'd love to know your thoughts, the 3 of you.
Some of my concern would be around ages, right? So that's one thing that's part of our safer congregation container, is to really consider the roles of people, right? And so, for example, if the person receiving the text was 18, that's one story. If the person sending the text is 18, that's a different story, right? So there's a lot of complexity there. And I think I can feel the concern of the parents as, hey, this is developmental, it's behavioral, it's important, and, right, there's still more press on schools. So it would really be my first instinct to find out what the needs were in the situation, and to really think about those on an individual basis, and then compare those questions, whatever comes up, to the Safer Congregations policies that we already have in place. At least that's kind of what I would start thinking about.
And I think that, this is a youth con, right, that this happened at. And, we don't
No, we're saying it's our class.
Oh,
the scenario is it's a junior high. It's a youth in a 7th to 9th grade OWL class. So probably they're between 7th, they're either in 7th, 8th, or 9th class. We don't know who the recipient was. That's true. They could be texting an 18-year-old youth. We don't know that in the scenario that they.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my inclination would be to also look at it as it relates to the covenant that you make in a class, in terms of the attention that you pay, and how we treat sexuality in OWL, and how sexting does or does not, or can or cannot, depending on the situation, comply with the values that we try and teach in OWL. So, and if we discovered in that conversation that they were out of our covenant or they were out of our values, then I think their parents definitely need to be brought in. But
yeah,
and probably go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that this brings in a conversation all of us should be having about what should both youth expect of their church, and what should parents expect of their church. And as a parent, I think there in this there's an issue of, it's not just looking at it in terms of sharing information with the parents. It's at this point, if you know about it and everyone else knows about it, it's actually to not talk to them is hiding it in some way from the parents. And do we hide information?
That was also something I thought about. There's a difference between secrets and confidentiality, and it feels like that would be more like secret keeping. And so, yeah, that's a very good point as well. And plus, my thing is too, because someone brought up, well, if my parents ever found out, I would have been punished because they were Baptist. But if you're already at a UU congregation, and in our whole lives, there's a different, in an L class, it's a different frame of reference and different context, in my opinion.
Yeah, and sorry, Theresa, you.
We might have talked about sexting in class, what the boundaries are, how it works, what it means, but that doesn't mean I want them to try it right then, right? So that's another aspect of like, hey, this is actually what we're talking about. How do you be a whole person in a healthy way? So, I mean, I think we probably will end up unfolding some of that anyway.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, speaking of how do we be whole people in healthy ways, that's an excellent. Hold on. Joanna.
Before you do that, I have to throw it back to Aisha because there was also some really big news, and I bet Aisha was involved with it, about who the FOS lecturer is going to be. Can you please announce it?
Robin DiAngelo is coming to GA to New Orleans for FOS lecture, and she's staying for the whole afternoon. She's actually doing her lecture and workshops, so it'll be Robin DiAngelo at General Assembly, Justice GA. I was just with her last night. We're so excited.
And if there are viewers of The View who have no idea who Robin DiAngelo is or why this is exciting news, can you let us know?
Yes, so Robin DiAngelo is Dr. Robin DiAngelo. She has a PhD in multicultural education. She has spent her adult life working on anti-racism, multiculturalism, and where she's a pioneer is that she has coined the term white fragility. And in her experience in bringing anti-racism work and multicultural work, she has found that white people over the years would react in almost a similar pattern. And so her body of work is connecting that pattern to institutional racism and white supremacy. And I saw her again last night. Her talk sold out 900 tickets in 6 hours at University of Washington. So that's where I was watching her last night. So and everyone's blown away. I've seen her now quite a few times, and every person who, when it's their first time to see her, she calls it seeing the water, whiteness in daily life, and really painting the picture of the world that we live in and how white dominance is pervasive, and that she said we can't be complacent anymore. So she's quite extraordinary. So I'm very, very excited. And yes, I did help make it happen because I really wish as many Unitarian Universalists, as many people as possible will hear her. So thank you, Joanna. I forgot all about that. Thanks.
That's super exciting.
That is super exciting.
She lives in Seattle, so I'm pretty lucky that I've gotten to know her personally because she does not live far from me, so that's pretty cool.
And we could certainly spend the rest of our hour talking about white fragility and white supremacy and how they both permeate Unitarian Universalism or our communities. And maybe we will in a future show, and maybe even with the guest we have today. But I was hoping that we might spend some time chatting today about ableism and about how we do or do not, as a religion, welcome people of all bodies and brains to our communities, and how we do or do not understand people of all kinds of bodies and brains as whole and beautiful. And Theresa, you have thought about this a lot, both from your own personal experience and also in super deep theological reflection, with some of which I've read and excites me very much. So do you want to? What are the things that you think people need to be paying attention to, or what's one thing? Let's start us off.
So when we talk about ableism, we're talking about a really specific thing. And it starts with what people used to know about disability. What people used to know about disability was that it was bad, and it was wrong, and it was sad, right? So if I saw a disabled person as a non-disabled person, the proper reaction was to be sorrowful and have pity for them, right? And that comes from the idea that disability equals brokenness. But actually, right, my work centers on the idea that being disabled is just one of the other ways to be human, right? Out of all the ways that we have to be human, disabled is one of them. And it's not worse. It might be more complicated if I'm trying to get into a Starbucks and the elevator is broken. But I don't want anyone to feel sorrow about that. Because even in that example, what we're saying is that the building has said, Theresa, you don't belong here getting your coffee, right? But if our beliefs are different than that, then it's not really about what my body is or isn't. It's about my personness. And ableism says that only bodies that appear able are the good ones. All the other ones are the bad ones. And we do that in a lot of subtle ways that are sometimes hard to measure, but really that's the question. Is every single body a good body? And I assert that yes, right? My body might be, sometimes I call it limbs with extra fun, right? My body might have some extra fun to it, but I'm still glad I have a home, right? I'm still glad I get to be myself, and I'm still glad to be part of an interdependent web. So when we look at ableism, what we're looking at is that old story that says that some bodies are bad. And so sometimes that works out to mean that it's okay if they can't come to church here. It's okay if they can't get into the RE classroom because their body's not that good anyway. It's all right. So that's kind of what we're working on, the whole framework of what it means for everybody to be a good body.
Theresa, I have a question about if you're comfortable, and of course you can always.
I sure am.
The General Assembly Service of the Living Tradition, where religious ministers and religious educators are honored in their transitions. You made a statement, and I want to give you an opportunity because I think people who either don't know you, haven't met you, or only saw one part of that have whatever assumptions or reactions in their head. And I would love to hear from you how you decided to do that and explain what you did and how you came to that decision. Because it was courageous. I mean, it was definitely took a stand in a very public way. So I would be interested to hear about your process leading up to that.
Or took a seat in a very public way.
I'm gonna tell you a little bit of backstory, right? When I became Unitarian Universalist, what I said to myself was, it's right in the name, Universalist. They have a place for everyone, right? But my experience was a lot different than that. Because physically, right, we're still housed in many old churches and many old buildings that don't contemplate people with mobility devices or other differences, right? So now I attended seminary for 4 years. I did 2 units of CPE. I spent 2 years with a congregation, and I showed up for ministry days, and I sat through a service in which every single metaphor was about walking. Now, I know walking is an important part of our daily life, right? Getting around, whatever you want to call it. And there's more to our spirituality than this. So when we center it on a metaphor that's not about my body, not about a lot of people's bodies, and see, that's the thing. I think people think sometimes that it's about my hurt feelings, right? But it's not. I'm really pretty tough. It's really about all the people who are waiting to find Unitarian Universalism, and then when they find it, can't fully participate because the only metaphor we hang on to some of the time, at least in that particular container, is walking. I'm pretty sure we can do better than that. So by the time it was time for the service of the living tradition, I was over it. I was like, you're gonna do that thing where you talk about walking as the top expression of spiritual life. And I walk out of survival. So you don't even contemplate my experience. And you knew that I was coming, right? It's not a surprise or a secret that I'm a Unitarian Universalist. So I was gonna not go. But when I wasn't gonna go, some of my friends said, well, we won't go either if you're not gonna go. And I thought, well, this is a really important moment where we all wait together to say we're entering ministry. So maybe I'll go. I don't want my friends not to go because they're united with me in supporting my vision of a Unitarian Universalism where I actually belong. So they made me a sign, right? It said, ouch. And then every time in that service, there was a metaphor about walking or standing when we have infinity options, when there could be a home for everyone in our Unitarian Universalism. I just held it up. And the thing was, I was on the front row behind the speaker. So it was pretty visible. And some of my friends also had them. I would also hold them up. One hard thing about it was that it created some confusion because, for example, if the speaker was saying, we stand with Black lives, and I held up the sign, then some people wondered, is she against Black liberation? No. But while we are all about Black liberation, we can't include all the people, right? So that's how that went.
What's some of the reaction you got?
Some of the reaction was really hard. Some of it was like, ableism is not a real thing. And so we don't know why you're making a big deal out of it, right? Other people said, we knew you were doing that and we didn't join you and it left you by yourself. And we won't do that again. We won't leave you by yourself again. And other people said, oh, I didn't even think about all those walking metaphors. Maybe I should start. So there was a spectrum of reaction. And I'm not sorry I did it because I really do think we can do better. One of the complexities is that people immediately worry that they have to remove every walking metaphor from the pile of things that we used. And that's not really the case. And one of the ways we can deal with this is by saying, hey, we're going to sing a song about walking now. Just remember, it's not the only thing we do to express our spirituality. So that takes 2 seconds and it makes more space. So it was interesting to see the reaction because I was really surprised that people who might have a sophisticated analysis about other kinds of oppression would tell me, no, Theresa, that's not real, right? But they're allowed to have an opinion. I don't have to like it.
And there was one pretty significant response to that. Jason Shelton. Do you want to talk about that?
That would be great. One of the things that has always existed as a walking, standing metaphor is our song about standing on the side of love. And Jason really gave it some thought and was kind enough to say the way that creating the original song was a spiritual experience for him. And then he went back and created new words, which are answering the call of love and don't implicate standing or walking. So now we have both versions available, one of which makes a lot of space. And actually, theologically, I'm really excited about answering the call of love, right? Because it means I'm doing something in the world as opposed to just standing around, which can be powerful. I'm not saying that it's not. But I am also pretty enthused about that additional meaning to unfold.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. I heard a lot of people going, "Oh, it's just a metaphor," and things like that, and I kept pushing back, encouraged by relationships with people for whom it's not just a metaphor. And the thing is that when it's the only metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
or when it's the metaphor for the best way we do justice,
Right.
then there's a problem. And so this fall in the congregation I serve, we sang "Standing on the Side of Love," and we sang the first verse with the original chorus, and then the other verses we changed it to "Answering the Call of Love." And I explained as we were introducing the song why, and it just became, yeah, some of us can stand on the side of love, and some of us can't, but all of us can do justice together. And it actually became a very powerful moment for the congregation, most of whom are able-bodied people for whom standing is not a problem, but not all of whom are able-bodied people. It became a very powerful moment to go, oh, yeah, we all can do justice no matter what our bodies do or do not do, how much fun our limbs come with.
Right.
So it was a great moment for us. Have any of the others of you had a chance to introduce those lyrics in your congregations?
Actually, we are this Sunday. We have a seminarian, Aaron Walter, who's going to be sermonating, and so we already have that in our order of service.
No, but I'm also the religious educator, not the senior minister. However, I know that I did see the song when it came out, and I'm sure that Elaine Peirce-Lua, our interim minister, will have an opportunity to use it. And I really appreciate the conversation, Theresa. Thank you, because I think there's, and the other thing about metaphor, what came to my mind was during the Multicultural Renaissance module workshop we have for religious educators and others who want to take it, we read Light and Dark by Jackie James, and she talks about white hat, everything white is good and everything black is bad. And so we understand those metaphors to be problematic. And she invites us to change that, right? And so it actually is along those same lines, that actually metaphors can be problematic when affirming a dominant paradigm. So I appreciate your lifting this up, and really courageous, seriously, because I know the UUA, what's not being named is how political we are. So you piss off the wrong person, then the ramifications can be severe. I mean, you're in preliminary fellowship, and one of the things I hear from my ministerial colleagues is being careful what they do and say in public so that they can get their final fellowship. And that's one of my disappointments with our faith, is that we pretend, not pretend, I'm going to take that back. We want to assert that we're so progressive, and sometimes when we have folks in our midst who act on that progressiveness, then we're not so progressive, so.
The thing about metaphors is that we use them because they're powerful, right? We use them because they appeal to more than one sense, even as they're a form of language, right? So I think that when people say it's just a metaphor, they're really just referring back to the idea that they would prefer not to change that particular container. Okay, I get it. I would prefer also that we expand our containers, right? I'm not saying give up every single thing. So that's important. And also, thank you for the acknowledgement and encouragement. I really appreciate it. I think for me, some of the time, I'm really clear that my community has brought me to this work, right? And about every 14 days, a person with a disability is killed by their parents or caregivers, right? And Unitarian Universalism has the potential to be a major interrupting force in that cycle, where we say, if you're a parent or caregiver at the end of your rope, you belong with us in our community, because we believe that every person matters. And we believe that your work matters, and we understand that you might not be validated by the person for which you're caring, right? All those things. And just to say that just because a person is disabled doesn't mean they're unfortunate.
Right. I understand that there is a program kind of like the Welcoming Congregation program that centers around accessibility issues. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, yes.
What are your thoughts on it?
Well, so the AIM program is new, and it's unfolding in pilot congregations, and it helps us talk about what would it mean to be a community that can include people of varying ability. So this includes not just mobility issues, but also hearing, seeing, right? Emotional issues, processing issues, all the things that we bring to community when we go participate. And so those are the things that, as you look at them, the program is a really good container to support those possibilities. And I really encourage people, if they're interested in expanding, they're welcome to go ahead and investigate about the program and see what's possible for their congregation. I heard one story once, which isn't really like the sum of accessibility, but I'm going to share it with you anyway because it shows a lot of heart. There is a very small congregation on the Oregon coast that knew that they needed a lift for their congregation to be able to welcome people with mobility devices. So they started. And the way they started was by collecting cans, right? And it's a small start for a small lift in a small place. But it's so much the right thing to do, to say, well, we can't do everything, but we're going to do something, and we're going to do it right now, right? So I really appreciate that.
I think a lot of times when we talk about accessibility and ableism, we talk about things that we can do, right? Concrete steps, get an interpreter, get a Braille hymnal, put in an elevator. But there's also, and you kind of spoke about this when we first started talking about the whole issue of how we see the world and how we see bodies. How is it that we really kind of get into, the whole concept of seeing the water that we swim in? Because those of us who are, like my husband is partially deaf, so I have seen how he is treated as if he has mental impairment. And then for those who have mental impairment, there's a whole other level in how they are treated. As churches, how do we get into that kind of work of seeing this privilege that we swim in?
I told you earlier that one of the things that we can encounter is that people come with an old story about disability. So the story that we use around disability generally is the first place to start. So the very first model that people tracked was the moral model. If you have a disability, you're probably cursed by the deity, or you did something wrong in your karma and now you're paying it back, whatever, moral. Then the next one was medical. If you have a disability, there's probably something wrong with you. You should go get that checked out, right? My friend Philip Paxton in New Zealand created a model that will help us as churches. It's called Constructive Functional Diversity. And what he means by this is that what we need to know about people is what will allow them to participate, right? So if it's pizza eating time, I am not disabled, right? If it's watching Adventure Time, I got that under control, right? If you want me to play sports, we probably have to make an adjustment, right? If you want me to go upstairs, I might need support. And each person that comes to a congregation, instead of wondering about their medical status, unless it pertains, right? Maybe they need to bring insulin to church and they need to have a refrigerator to put it in, right? But we don't need to wonder about their medical status unless it's part of how they participate. We don't need to wonder about their moral status because that's not a model that we engage with. But their function, maybe they need large print music to sing in the choir, right? Maybe they need something else to participate in a religious education class. And the way we participate together is really the answer to how we view that disability. Because the more I understand how a person participates, the more I can connect with them in their humanity, and their disability is just one of their features, one of their aspects, right? So I think that helps us, instead of being stuck around how it looks or what the words are, to say, okay, but let's talk about participation. And once we use that lens, I mean, you'll still feel it inside yourself, right? You might have feelings or thoughts about it, but if you're having a conversation about participation, that's going to move the relationship forward in a healthy way, right? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and it's all about intention, and that's what we try to do in our RE programs, especially because we have to accommodate so many people of different everything, ages, ranges, and so having that intention is super important, and it's living out our values. And no, it's not easy. That's the whole point. I think for those in the dominant paradigm who've just the world is set up for you or them, doing something different can be uncomfortable, does take more work, and so very worth it. And it's part of our answering the call to love. So it does make sense.
And what I'm hearing also is a sense that we don't presume what it takes for someone else to participate. That we have the conversation with everyone. I mean, if I need a fridge for my insulin, you might not know that just by looking at me.
Right.
For example, I think of several children in the congregation I serve, whose minister I am, and who are on the autism spectrum, and they each need different things to participate because autism manifests in so many different ways in different people. And so it's not a matter of going, oh, so and so is on the autism spectrum, here's what I'm going to presume that they need to participate. It's a matter of me finding out what they need by forming relationships.
Right.
By saying, we want you to participate as fully as possible. What does that mean?
What does it mean?
What does it mean for me to make space for you to participate as fully as possible? Is that fair that I'm hearing that?
I think that's a really great question and a really great starting place. I think I was surprised that people were surprised when I started to articulate the idea that I'm not oppressed by my body. My body doesn't oppress me. My body doesn't complicate my life. My body is just where I live, right? And there's some extra fun, and I deal with that as I do. But because we inherit old stories, people are willing to put their story on someone else's body, right? And it's not actually appropriate to do that. So we understand really clearly that when it comes to touching people, we get consent first, right? And we understand clearly that a lot of the things we do are by consent. But when it comes to putting our stories on other people's bodies, that story is going to shape a lot of the interaction in that person's experience. So it's probably better if you get consent first, or at least check in with your own reality and find out, what is your experience, right? And so that not assuming, not presuming is a super important gateway to having a healthy, appropriate relationship. And I'm going to tell you one more thing. So it's our first principle that people have inherent worth and dignity. Listen, this is how you express it. This is how you live that, by not putting your stories on other people's bodies and by finding out what they need to participate.
So Theresa, a question for you and also Aisha, and that is, do we have things, do we have curriculum or things already so that with our children, we can start it in a younger age, right? That to shaping, opening up how they view what it is to be human, what it is to have bodies. Any thoughts on that?
Well, we have Owl, right? Owl's pretty affirming of every single body. And then we have the RE guidance, you would know, from Sally Patton, where she really shapes the RE classroom as a place of liberation. So you can say more about that. That'd be great.
Yeah, Sally Patton is actually a mom of an autistic child who wrote a book called Welcoming Children with Special Needs. And her training, which I don't know if she offers anymore, is one of the best I have ever taken, where we went for a couple of days and she talks about exactly what we've been talking about, creating the framework and having a holistic view of what children need. Now, yes, we actually are with teacher training, and I always talk to parents, and parents are very willing. Every now and then I get a parent who isn't quite as upfront, which is not helpful. But for the most part, when we have children with special needs, I absolutely have a long conversation with the parent about what the needs are, and I prepare the teachers. And I'm very fortunate to have educators who are volunteering as Sunday school teachers. One of the things we have in our congregation is a gentleman who comes from a group home every week, and he's been coming for, I don't even know, 20 years. And he doesn't speak, and he's in a wheelchair, and he is able to, he gets dropped off. He doesn't have any other family. And what's great is that the congregation, the former minister told me they had a hard time at first because he can't verbalize. He emotes noises when he's happy, and we know when his name is Roland. We know when he's happy. We know when he's emotional. And what's great is the children, will come say hello to him. Some of them, not all of them, but some parents make it a point. And I actually will every now and then announce, say, everyone, Roland loves, to say hello and hugs, and, so he starts emoting. And so having the, normalizing and saying, hey, you're part of we are all a community, and we're all part of this, and we express ourselves differently. And it does take intention, and it does take because the congregation has we have a lot of special needs adults and children and youth. So I know who has Asperger's and who's on the spectrum, and I have one child who didn't talk until he was in 2nd grade. And so is just verbalizing just in the last year and becoming social. And we make space. We really, really do. And it's extraordinary. And I'm really in a wonderful congregation that takes the time, and we have meetings. But there are resources. There's a lot of resources because religious educators have, I don't know if we have a higher number of autistic children in RE programs, but it feels like it, but we talk and share resources all the time, religious educators, with each other.
So one of the challenges is just bringing all that information from only the RE department to the entire life of the congregation. And if your RE director is already doing that work, then they can continue to support it, right? You need to ask them, what do you usually do? So
that's something where the shared ministry and shared leadership in a congregation for me is part of my drumbeat, is that I really feel strongly, Theresa, that's part of how we do this work, is when leadership is in collegiality and we look at the church as a whole, then there's a place to make that space and not be siloed, that, okay, the minister does the worship in the sanctuary and the RE directors either downstairs, upstairs, or in another building altogether, but actually we're one church. And so that's why it's all connected, right? Intersectionality. So go ahead, Joanna, you jump in.
Okay, so that was one of my questions is, are there particular issues surrounding intersectionality with ableism?
Well, I kind of pointed to one earlier where it was either that I was not in support of Black Lives Matter or only in support of myself. And actually, no, like if something I was doing was going to harm the movement for Black liberation, I wouldn't do it, right? it's that important that all of us make it. And actually, that's the definition that I've heard of solidarity, that all of us need all of us to make it. So when we talk about that, it's pretty easy to say, right? But then I could count the accessible chancels in our movement, right? So it hasn't been important for the disabled ministers to make it up to this point. And the only reason I identify it in that particular way is that leadership is a particular vantage point. So if I know that I can't get my scooter on the chancel, then I know that a congregant in a scooter can't light the chalice, can't read the opening words, can't lead the singing. Whatever it is in your congregation, it's not available to them. So when we talk about other identities and other things, one of the things about being disabled is that a lot of disabled people have less energy and less physical resource to draw on. So that means if you're expecting disabled people to do all the work to liberate themselves, they're going to run out of steam, and the situation is going to stay pretty much the same as it is. But if our movements care about all of us making it, then it's possible that when one part of the church does work for this kind of justice, for example, when the church hosts families that are houseless, they can also look and see, what about families that are houseless with disabled members, right? And in that way, we don't reduplicate the effort. And in that way, we say that every person matters.
I also, what you said about consent for people's stories got me thinking along the lines of intersectionality, and in terms of the fact that when someone does something without consent, be it touch someone or use someone's story, it's a manifestation of power and of oppressive power in particular. And so I think that there are a lot of people who have had the experience of understanding what it means to have someone not do something consensual to them, and I think that that's maybe a ground for building compassion. I think of pity. You brought up pity earlier in our conversation as a power thing too, and as a manifestation of unequal power. I pity you.
Right. You don't have to get to know me.
Right.
You don't have to find out what I actually need. You don't have to hold the door open. You can just feel real sorry for me. Don't. I'm fine. Right. Yeah. So that's how that works. I think that's a really good point. And the thing is, right, having compassion is different, right? Because that's a power with someone. If I have compassion for you in your life, that means a whole different set of things than if I just feel sorry. And so it's really useful to look and see what feelings we express, what feelings we're having. And the thing is, right, you can't control the feeling that might come up. It's kind of like weather, it just comes up. But you can examine it, you can take care of it, you can support it, and then you can have a different thought that moves you toward a different feeling. So
what would you like to see happen right at this point, like with everything the way it is? What would you like to see happen to move forward?
Well, I think that one of the things that's really important is for us to really identify what's the story. So if you look around your congregation and you don't see any disabled people, there's two things about that. One is you can't see every disability by looking at it, right? Some people have chronic pain, other people might have seizures. There's lots of things that you just can't put in your field of vision and say, okay, well, I know what their disability is. But even when you know it, you don't know their experience. So if you look around and you see not any identifiable disabled people, there's still a question of who here needs support. And that goes back to participation. So it's really pretty likely that even if you don't see any walkers or scooters or wheelchairs, that there are people that are struggling with disabilities that still need support. And I don't know how we start that conversation unless we're just brave and start it, right? And say, we'd like to open a supportive space, a supportive conversation. Let's have it. So maybe that's one of the first things, is to say, here with these people that I already know who needs support.
In the church that I serve, I'm sure y'all have heard the term burning coal. We talk about burning coals as something very specific, as being the individual thing that someone really feels passionate about. So if we have people in our congregations for whom accessibility and ableism are a burning coal, do you have any suggestions first for what they can do at their congregational level with that? And then in terms of our association, are there groups that they can join? You know, what can they do with this?
Sure. So one thing when we talk about accessibility and inclusion that each person can do, right? Whether you're a layperson, a lay leader, a minister, director of religious education, music minister, all the people ever, anyone who ever participates can join Equal Access. Equal Access is an organization that exists outside the UUA to support and promote the inclusion of Unitarian Universalists with disabilities. And it is a membership organization, so when you join, if you pay a fee, then you're supporting the programming and other support that we offer to the congregations and to individuals. So that's one pretty important thing that anybody can do. And then another is to consider we talked about the credentialing program. It's accessibility and inclusion ministry. And that's the program where you would have your congregation go through a process and examine how your congregation is for accessibility and actually get certified as an accessible congregation in different kinds of ways. And then the third thing is to continue the exploration. So if you consider yourself generally able-bodied, it's good to start by asking yourself, what's my usual view of people with disabilities? And go from there. One thing when you're having a conversation